It's the sauce, Alexander.
This is Watts.
Make sure you like, subscribe, Ring General Podcast.
And don't forget to subscribe to the Ring Generals, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter.
Absolutely.
Do it, or I will get you.
And you're watching the Ring General Podcast. Turn this man around. Turn this man around. Subscribe, like, and comment.
Well, raise a glass in the sky and salute the Ring Generals.
That's right.
Welcome, everybody, to the Ring Generals Podcast. My name is Nick Nenad. Alongside me is Eazy-E Eric Santos.
It's cooking, guys.
And, of course, the RKJ Man.
Let's talk that talk, y'all. Hypocritical Nick. He's no longer the uncrowned champion. Let's go.
Now, what RKJ Man is talking about is, of course, Francis Ngannou claiming, yes, he won the UFC Heavyweight Championship via Francis Ngannou style, brutal knockout. And he is a champion. He's a fighting champion, apparently, and we will get into that a little bit later. The opponents that he can face, and we're also going to analyze that fight. We're going to get into a little bit more MMA later in the show. I also want to mention that on this podcast today with me will also be Jesse Chaparro. He will be joining in at some point. He was not available to come on immediately, but we are going to have a long enough podcast to where he will be able to join whenever he can. So we'll get excited when he just pops in here. We don't know when he's going to show up. So but I'm definitely Eric. I'm definitely interested to get his take on the whole Francis Stipe and Jon Jones stuff. But yeah, so let's get right into it, guys. You know, like. Obviously, Francis is the heavyweight champion. You know, Francis looked hella good in the fight. Head kicks, leg kicks, takedown defense. He even tried to take down of his own, ground and pound. I mean, we saw everything out of Francis Ngannou when we expected nothing, right? We expected just the knockout power. So, RKJ, man, you're the casual fan. I'll toss it over to you first. Your thoughts on Francis Ngannou winning the UFC Heavyweight Championship?
I'm so happy for the Black Jeff Hardy. I'm so happy for the Predator, Francis Ngannou. If I had some champagne, I would probably pop some champagne at this point in the podcast right now. We already toast the new champion of the heavyweight division. I said this before. Black Stradamus came out in this match again. He was right, okay? Now, did I say he was going to win in the first round? Yes, and I was wrong in that point. But he wore him down enough that in the second round, it was only a matter of time. And the thing I knew was going to happen, Francis Ngannou was in a situation, in kind of a predicament where he was kind of wrestling a little bit with Stipe, and there wasn't fear or panic from Francis Ngannou when he was in that predicament, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. There was calmness, there was coolness. He was almost like, hey, man, if you want to get on the mat, we can get on the mat and do this right now. And that's something that I had said last week. I said he needs to bring something different to this matchup that we haven't seen from Francis before, especially in that fight previously in 2018 to kind of surprise Stipe. And I think once that happened, Stipe realized like, this is something different. This is something new. But like I said, he needed to win this. He needed the first or second round. If it was going to go longer, he was going to lose this fight. And guess what? He took advantage in the second round. He knocked Stipe the hell out, and he's now the new champion. And all I've got to say is bring on Jon Jones, because that is the next I want to see as a casual fan.
So, Eric, you know, RKJ Man's not wrong here. We saw a lot from Francis. The first round prediction of a knockout almost happened too after the takedown defense. That brutal ground and pound, I do agree with you. I think that knocked some sense into Stipe Miocic, and also might have knocked some other stuff into him, to be honest, as well. So, Eric, you know, when you watch this fight too, in that final sequence, you know, Francis, you know, I think a lot of other men knock out or get knocked out by Francis with the first punch. Somehow Stipe was able to take that first shot. And Stipe actually delivered a great right hand himself, and it looked like he wobbled Francis. His legs shook. There was a little bit of tiredness in Francis in the second round. So in your opinion, Eric, if that knockout wouldn't have happened and Stipe would have been able to get away from it, do you think the fight would have been different? And do you think Stipe would have ended up winning this fight?
I think that Stipe, he would have a couple rounds won in him, but I still think that for the favor of Francis Ngannou, he would still win the match up until like maybe third or fourth round. But it's one of those things where how many strikes that Stipe would have landed. But either way, I think the thing that really just opened Stipe's eyes was the fact that Francis was able to, counter, actually like not get taken down, because obviously he was going to go Stipe was going to double leg him, but then he was able to break out of it. Francis was able to break out of it, and Stipe was like, well, what the hell happened? That's the thing that surprised him. And so we all know that Francis was training with Kamaru Usman for something that Kamaru Usman, he had a feeling that, I know Stipe is going to ankle pick him, so let's work on that, or other tactics. So you can totally tell that Francis was working on his wrestling. And I know I was a little bit concerned about how much time he would have had for his wrestling if he learned enough to take on Stipe. But without a doubt, I was happy about Francis, and that thing, man. I think the first round really made Stipe's like, okay, I got to go with a different plan, because he's not going to get ankle picked easily. And in the second round, man, oh man, I also kind of want to add that in, where he saw that uppercut, and you knew that it looks like Stipe was like, oh boy. And then you see Francis just uppercutting him, and then freaking Stipe folded.
Yeah, well, it's amazing Francis Ngannou's power, because what I noticed from all of this, not only that, I did notice that he was tiring a bit in that second round, and that right hand from Stipe did, looking back on it, did rock him a lot.
Yeah.
But Francis, that's a full right hand from Stipe. Francis is like hitting half jabs, like not even full punches that are knocking out Stipe. We've seen this in the past too with Cain Velasquez and and Junior Dos Santos, older fighters, much like Stipe, where it's not really a legitimate knockout punch like with Blades and with Alistair Overeem and Rosenstruck, exactly. It's more of just normal punches to these older guys that make it able for Francis to be so dangerous. And it just, when I look at Francis Ngannou, I see the heavyweight champion of the world. This guy's not a light heavyweight. He is a heavyweight that has to lose weight to get to the heavyweight limit, much like our friend Brock Lesnar and much like Alistair Overeem back in the day as well. So there's a lot to be impressed by Francis, but I think we have to move on to the next thing, because yes, I think a lot of us expected Francis to beat Stipe. Stipe is potentially the greatest of all time, right? We at least in the heavyweight division. At this moment right now, okay. I think it was RKJ, man. To your point, let me just explain this whole thing. I think if Francis could end up being the best heavyweight of all time, and then another guy could be the best heavyweight of all time if he comes and jumps up to heavyweight and light heavyweight, and that's Jon Jones. We'll get to him in a second. But as far as Stipe goes, RKJ, man, I'll turn it to you. When you see what happened to Stipe, you see his game plan, you see the way he looked. What's next for Stipe Miocic?
Retirement. 38 years old. He's getting older.
Oh, he's older than that. Is he? Yeah, I think he's in his 40s, right?
He's 38.
38.
Yeah,
oh wow, he does not look 38 though.
He doesn't look 38.
It's a good job of keeping himself in shape.
I'm going to be quite frank with you and honest with you. Something didn't look right about Stipe going into this match. I don't know what it was. I have no clue, but he just did not look right mentally going into this fight. So I'm going to be honest with you. The division's getting younger. Francis Ngannou is 36. He's 2 years off, but Francis Ngannou is a very young 36. I don't think he's had that many fights under his belt.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah.
So
he is not.
He's a very young 36. In fantastic shape. That he's a person I think is going to dominate that division for a few years, especially if he doesn't have a mega fight on his hands. So, I mean, Stipe Miocic, he's going to have to constantly fight up the ladder again. I just don't see where he goes. I don't see him as a main attraction star anymore for UFC. He's 38. He's got another career in Ohio, I think, as a firefighter. So yeah. He's doing well for himself. But I have a big thing. Unless you're Tom Brady, when you get near your 40s, Father Time is always knocking on your door. So it's a situation, even in UFC, that's the case. And I just don't believe Stipe has enough main event quality, big time feel to him anymore. Honestly, after seeing this fight, he got destroyed in this fight. He got embarrassed.
And so, Eric, do you give any chance to a Stipe Francis 3, or do you think, I think like myself and RKJ, man, we don't really want to see that for two reasons. One, I think Francis wins pretty easily. And two, Stipe, there's the rumors of CTE. His speech is a little slurred. It always was slurred, but it's a lot worse now than it was at the beginning of his title run. Would you like to ever see Stipe versus Francis 3?
I wouldn't doubt that we're going to get that. Not right now, not anytime soon. We'll probably get that in the future. But without a doubt, I know Stipe will be up for it. Francis, at this point, he said, I'll take on anybody. He's right now climbed to the top of the mountain. He's right now happy, celebrating. And he's just willing to go out there and try to be the best heavyweight probably of all time right now and be a fighting champion. So I can see that happening. I know there's also been like a lot of things where people on social media that I've been seeing, oh, Stipe, he got folded, but he wasn't afraid of challenging Francis Ngannou. Another guy who's not even afraid of challenging Francis Ngannou. And that's the thing that a lot of people may not see is Jon Jones, because there have been people trying to make freaking memes about Jon Jones saying that, he's afraid of going up against Francis Ngannou. But I think it's safe to say Jon Jones clarified it. He's going to challenge him soon. But without a doubt, Stipe, he's not afraid to challenge Francis. Maybe a few things he'll be tweaking up a little bit here and there. But we're not going to see that anytime soon.
All right, everybody, welcome Jesse Chaparro. It's perfect timing. We just finished our analysis on Stipe and Francis Ngannou. So Jesse, give us your thoughts. The two questions we've asked essentially so far is your thoughts on Francis winning the heavyweight championship and your thoughts on the future of Stipe Miocic. Give both answers right here.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys, again.
Of course.
As
Shout
for
out to the Ronda
Stipe's
Rousey
future,
shirt.
what's up?
Shout out to the Ronda Rousey shirt.
Oh, there you go. Ronda Rousey here. But anyways, back to your questions. As for Stipe, either there's going to be a trilogy fight between him and Ngannou, which it's inevitable, possibly, but it's at the end of the day, it's about the money fights, super fights. Like I just heard Eric said, it's about the Jon Jones fight, which is a mega fight. Everybody wants to see it. Why not? But Stipe's future, man, it depends all on Ngannou. If he decides to go for a third fight with Stipe, that'll be good for him. Basically, it'd be like DC and Stipe trilogy all over again. But as Ngannou, he could probably break Stipe's record for most heavyweight title defenses. So, I mean, Ngannou's only 34. He's got a couple of years ahead of him. So, I mean, he's got some pretty interesting fights with Derek Lewis. Curtis Blades could come back again. Who knows? What's his name? What's that French guy?
Cyril Gane.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, I mean, he's got interesting fights up ahead of him. Who knows? But yeah, future's bright for him.
Absolutely. So Jesse, getting back to this, the specific fight, how impressed were you by Francis in the win? You're obviously talking about how you think he could be potentially the crown, how many fights in a row he'd win, the heavyweight division, how many title defenses he'd win. Well, how impressed were you by Francis after what he did to Stipe?
You know what? Coming into this fight, I was actually wondering how his takedown defense is, and he answered it. And Stipe tried to take him down in the first round, did not go. I don't think Stipe tried to attempt the second round, and I was surprised more about his movement. You don't see many heavyweights move around, and throw a lot of leg kicks, and Ngannou's been throwing some leg kicks in there and kind of caught Stipe off guard because like the first fight, Ngannou didn't know how to throw leg kicks at all. He was just up the hands and that's it. But he looked crisp out there. He looked actually pretty damn good. Congratulations to him. I know a lot of people counted him out, but like I said, it's a 50-50 for me. But then as soon as I saw that with Ryan here, Ryan was going crazy for Ngannou, aka Black Jeff Hardy. But you know what? It's all about the new superstar, the Predator, Francis Ngannou. So yeah, I was amazed.
Okay, Jay.
Look, man, I haven't been that emotional for something like that since Kofi won at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
So that was like one of the best things I've seen. So it was a huge, huge thing for me to see Francis Ngannou, who's come all this long way, who had a major stump in the road in 2018 against Stipe, him overcome it. He was knocking guys out, wasn't getting his opportunity. Now he gets his opportunity, and he doesn't miss on his second chance. And that's what I love about UFC right now. And that's why I think they're honestly doing better in WWE in terms of storyline telling. It's much better. Like I'm excited about whenever Francis Ngannou is going to fight next.
I don't know if there is a better story than Francis Ngannou in like sports history. I don't. The stories of how he got out of Cameroon are unbelievable. That he would then turn into the heavyweight championship. Like my great grandfather escaped, war-torn Serbia, and walked all the way to Germany by himself, and then got to Ellis Island and all this stuff. My great grandfather didn't become the heavyweight champion of the world. He was actually at one point, name dropping. He was at one point in the World's Strongest Man competition. But which is funny. I get the jokes. I'm the skinniest motherfucker you guys know. But my great grandfather was actually a part of the World's Strongest Man competitions. But again, like, this is just ridiculous. I mean, it took him days and months and almost years to even just get to France to fight in the French MMA league, which nobody really knows about. I mean, funny enough, we actually have two now top 5 heavyweights that are, have affiliation to France. But it's just a ridiculous story. And the fact that after losing the heavyweight title fight the first time, he comes back and wins and beats the same guy. It's amazing. And that's why, Eric, I'll give you take on that too. Just that story is just ridiculous.
I mean, I look at his story, him, working in the sand mines since he was 10 years old. It was just it was like no other option. He was forced to do that. He hated it. He didn't like doing it. And so it's one of those things where it does remind me a little bit of kind of like my story of my mom when she was working in Mexico, where basically there was like no electricity. There was nothing. And so they had to work with, I guess like what they were doing was that they were, what they were making they were adobe bricks. And so at the time, this is like back in the 60s. And so there was like nothing. And I can kind of see that comparison between my mom's like labor and also Francis's labor. And to this day, Francis actually goes back to Africa, to Cameroon, and still works in the sand mines. Even though this is something that he hated, he says, but now I enjoy it. Like now I embraced it. And he was actually able to afford enough money to buy himself a truck for the sand mines, which was something that he was been trying to work for a long time. So, not just, trying to escape from Africa, trying to get out of that place and trying to get out of the harsh labor and trying to work through and become heavyweight champion. It's just how he was brought up. And man, I think they got to do a movie out of Francis Ngannou. If there was one athlete they got to make a movie out of, it's Francis.
Yeah, I mean, Eric, to speak on your point though, they already had a couple of movies. Conor McGregor has it. Jose Aldo has it. And, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. What's it called? Muhammad Ali has it. So I mean, look, but yeah, you're right. This is exactly of how should I say, a man who put blood, sweat, and tears, basically sacrificed his life in Cameroon. Well, basically, he had to leave there. He was forced to leave there.
Yeah, he was forced. Yeah.
I mean, look, man, the guy is like a Cinderella story. This is the most beautiful thing you could ever see and watch and hear.
Yeah. It was a lot of joy when a lot of the people over in his hometown in Cameroon, when they saw it, they were just like, they were just popping bottles and just celebrating. That was heartwarming. That was heartwarming to me.
Well,
watching from his home,
he's amazing videos.
Yeah.
So,
to RKJ Man's point, though, the UFC is developing a lot of great stories. And the next story we want to see is Francis Ngannou versus Jon Jones. I think if you're an MMA fan, to not want that fight, I don't know if you could call yourself an MMA fan, because you may not want Jon Jones to make over $10 million for his next fight, but you want to see that damn fight. And now we have the biggest face in UFC history, versus one of the biggest heels in MMA history in Jon Jones, a guy that has ruined main events, that has cost people money, that has cost people injuries in his hit and run accident. What else is it? You know what I'm saying? I don't mean to demean Jon Jones, but what a story we have of the most dominant MMA fighter, in my opinion, who has also played the bad boy role for a very long time, versus the most humble athlete I have ever seen in my life. Oh, yeah, and you have the element of heavyweight punches being thrown and Jon Jones weighing 30 pounds more than he normally does. How could you not want that?
I mean, you put it in a really good, crafty way, Nick. You know, yeah, he essentially is the bad boy of MMA. You know, from hit and runs to cocaine to being popped by USADA multiple times, him having to forced to vacate the lightweight heavyweight title. I mean, he was stripped. I mean, and then DC took over, and then, you know, they had their, you know, bad blood, but at the end of the day, Jon Jones overcame victorious. And unfortunately for DC, and every single trilogy he's ever been, he's lost it. So he's ended up on the bad side. So that sucks for him. But yeah, I do want to see Ngannou and Jon Jones. And if Dana does not want to pay him, shit, I'm not gonna be the first one to go to the GoFundMe.com and try to raise that.
Absolutely.
So
I was gonna bring that up too, like, because the only thing holding this fight back is this weird rift between Dana White and Jon Jones over Jon Jones's pay. And
it's not just Jones. It's not just Dana. It's Reebok. Reebok is and their deal ended today.
But here's the thing, so Reebok's deal's over. So how did, like, it's so interesting. Like, maybe, like, you know, the UFC was like, John, just wait like 2 fucking days, bro. Like, we'll be out of that deal. No, but again, I mean, essentially the financials are the only thing holding this fight back. And Jon Jones, in my opinion, like I said, is the best heavyweight, the best fighter of all time. So he should deserve to get the highest amount of pay for his biggest fight of all time. And I mean, I know there's been heavyweight fights that have been monstrous in the past, but in modern day, to have this type of knockout artist that we really haven't seen before, versus technically, you know, the best fighter ever, Jon Jones deserves to be paid the max. I mean, we see shortstop Francisco Lindor getting $340 million yesterday by the New York Mets for not being the best player in the MLB, right? So for Jon Jones to not get like $15 million for a fight in like his 30th fight, I think for the UFC, that's ridiculous. And I think they should pay him whatever he wants. Now, if he's asking for, you know, double the amount that anybody else has ever paid for, I think that might be a little much. But Jon Jones, what he's doing here is what every other sports athlete has done in the past. He is trying to get pay moved up for champions so that every other fighter behind him gets paid higher too. If Jon Jones gets paid $15 million, then what's Kamaru Usman, who's undefeated, getting paid? You know, what's Michael Chandler, who if he gets paid and wins the lightweight championship, what should he get paid? So it's for the betterment of UFC and for the betterment of these guys' lives. You know, an interesting fact, but I know I'm ranting a little long, but I have a lot of interesting statistics here. Jamie Mullarkey, the man who got the knockout in the first fight on the main card against Kama Worthy, he got paid $24,000 to fight Saturday.
Yeah, I saw that.
$24,000. That's RKJ, that's the way UFC operates. So now you will kind of understand why Jon Jones might want so much money, because Jon Jones is so much more high profile. He's done so much, yes, negatively, but positively for the UFC as well, with being, you know, this must-see champion. They've literally moved fights from Vegas to the Forum just to have the fight happen so Jon Jones can fight. You know what I'm saying? So, like, there's a lot at stake here with the UFC. I really want to get your guys' take on this too, because it just interests me that this whole debacle with UFC not paying people.
Look, let me just go back on one thing. If you're a UFC fan and you don't want to see Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou, you must be smoking the purest form of cocaine, methamphetamine, or any other type of experimental drug that is out there right now in the market. Okay, and I would encourage you to stop doing that. And now here's the situation. Okay, Jon Jones does not want to be, and I'm going to go to wrestling, a WWE reference, another Bret Hart. Now, in an interview a long time ago, Scott Hall had an issue with Bret Hart, and one of the issues he had with Bret Hart was you were willing to take less money to be a mark for yourself as a champion. And guess what? You screwed it up for everybody else. Mm-hmm. So, Nick, to your point, I agree. Jon Jones is not going to be a mark for himself. He's not going to screw it up for everybody else. He's going to put everybody else in the right position to succeed. Now, here's what I think personally. We've talked about it with wrestling. Let's talk about it with UFC. Let's talk about it with MMA. I think there needs to be a union. Okay, there needs to be some type of intermediary between when these types of situations happen, because what's happening is Dana White, just like Vince McMahon and just like a lot of these greedy sports owners and these organizations are doing across the country and across the world, is they're dictating these negotiations. They're dictating these terms. They're manipulating these guys, young guys who are desperate to make a name for themselves, who are taking less pay in an effort to make a name for themselves and betting on themselves. And then as soon as they bet on themselves and they win, UFC or whoever it is comes off and says, you know what? We don't want to do that anymore. We don't want to pay you as much as we want to. We got another person waiting in the weeds. Well, I think if you have a union, it's a situation where guess what? You won't have that problem anymore. And Dana White is going to have to figure out a way to pay Jon Jones more money or some type of bargaining agreement where all the UFC fighters can say, hey, this is how much you should be making as a champion or how much you should be making in a big time fight based off the revenues and stuff like that. Because fans are coming back eventually, if not this year, next year. So the revenue is going to go back up again. And all that we're going to see is Dana White keep storing it in his pocket and not giving it to anybody else. He's had multiple issues with champions. It's not just Jon Jones.
Nope.
Yeah. So, Jesse, go ahead.
I was going to add on to Ryan's thing. I mean, yeah, there's a possibility there might be a union, or if not, they might go back to their old ways where they just used to just have sponsors from different companies to sponsor them, and then they just show up and fight. And before the Reebok came in, everything was just fine. It's just how, like you said, Dana White kind of got a little, greedy, and then decided to kind of trap these guys into one sponsored contracts. And then it kind of screwed them over because they're making like tons of money. They're making millions. And now they're just down to chump change, which is basically thousands of dollars. Maybe the least they earn is like 10 grand or 30 grand. But then it's not going to, they have to pay their gyms, their coaches, and everybody who's involved in that camp. So it kind of screws them over.
Well, and I will say this, there's a lack of minor leagues for MMA. So $10,000 to fight, $10,000 to win, $20,000 for 20 minutes of your time. I know there's a lot of training before that. That's a lot of money. And if you're trying to make the UFC and you're on the first fight of the card on the ESPN Plus prelims, I don't think you should be being paid, major money, right? Minor league baseball players don't get paid major money, and guys that barely scrub the bench in the NFL don't make that much money, right? So I don't think a UFC fighter should be making, much more at the minimum. If you're on the main event card, though, there should be at least a minimum like $50,000 for being enough of a promotional name to be on that paid for card. Now, Jesse, I believe these guys make money off the pay-per-view, correct? Like if you're on the pay-per-view card, you must make extra money, correct?
They do, but up to a certain limit. It depends on the performances as well. I mean, it just relies on that.
And then you also have the fact that I've been fucking fans for like a year too, so there's not that live gate. That will be different now. Eric, I wanted to switch it to you because you haven't talked about this yet. Canelo Alvarez took a pay cut his last fight. Now Canelo Alvarez, Eric, you can vouch for this. One of the most famous Mexican professional athletes, correct? The Mexicans love him, and he puts on a fucking show every single time he goes on. The only man he's really lost to is Floyd Mayweather because he was like 21 years old, and Mayweather was a great fighter. Mayweather's one of the best of all time as well. Canelo Alvarez took a pay cut from $35 million per fight to $20 million. Jon Jones is asking for about 60% of that. Do you think that's ridiculous? Do you think Jon Jones is worth 60% of Canelo Alvarez on a pay cut?
I mean, it depends on, because you're also talking about two worlds here, two different worlds, MMA and boxing. For boxing, there's if you look at it, it can be split. It can be a lot much more higher than what they're making from the guys from MMA. It looks like the Venom deal that they had with UFC. It's not much of a difference from the Reebok deal. I looked at the amount of money that they're getting paid for. They're only getting paid like what, $2,000 extra? $2 extra?
Yeah.
$2,000 to $5,000 extra. It depends on the championship too.
Yeah, so it's not much of a difference. All it is just like two bucks off or something like that. With boxing, I think it's a little bit much more higher for Jon Jones. It's just a matter of how much it kind of feels like, okay, now it feels like star power is all that matters, and the fact that Jon Jones, like most of his guys, didn't really matter. So, and I think what Dana's also looking for is he's trying to look for like headlining pay-per-views. You know, he's looking for like what they're making, like, because they see how much guys like Conor McGregor makes, and so like what they can draw. Brock Lesnar can draw with Jon Jones. I guess like I guess what he's trying to do, what Dana White's trying to do, is that he wants to kind of say like, oh well, he's afraid of Francis, so that's a good way to like hide the fact that he's not going to get paid extra. I came across this tweet from Derek Brunson, and he's actually siding with Dana on this one. Ooh. So I'm gonna read this for you guys. Derek Brunson, UFC middleweight. So this is what he said. I never hear a fighter on top say fighters need to be paid more. It's always I need to be paid more. Smart logic say if you're on top, group up, in which return would benefit you later, but no one cares until it hits close to home. While we're talking about fighters' pay, what about the fighters who live to fight? I'm not in one of them, so it doesn't pertain to me, but I'm compassionate for those individuals. The 1% needs to fight their own battles. We learn more money emoji for Conor doesn't equals better fighter pay. So with that being said, Dana and investors, I'm with y'all. Keep eating until these smart guys get smart and apply that pressure. Fighters don't sign a 10-fight contract, then complain after 2 fights. Where was the energy beforehand?
That is true.
You know what's funny? At the end of that makes that whole argument better for me, because they're signing contracts. So I think it's more, these guys need to sign better contracts. RKJ, man, your thoughts on this though, because you made a lot of facial expressions during that entire thing. So
I feel like what does it matter if you're signing a predatory contract? Like, to be honest with you, like these contracts that they're signing is basically exploiting these guys and putting them in bad situations to be in these big time fights, but yet get little small returns on their investment. So, it doesn't really make any sense to me. Like, they should complain and they should set it up to where they should be able to try to renegotiate. If I'm fighting these fights and I sign a 5-contract deal and I've knocked out these 2 opponents and I've gotten, multi-million-dollar gates and I'm still only getting thousands of dollars, I should be able to renegotiate to the table. I feel like there should be some type of renegotiations. For example, if you're at a job and you've been there for a year or a certain amount of time and you've been able to reach that company, take that company to new heights, and you're still making the same money, that's not fair. You should be able to ask for a raise, and you're doing a lot more. You should be able to ask for more money. So I think the same should be applied for UFC. So that's why I think there needs to be a union. Somebody who can come in between and said, okay, this is what's going on. This is how these fighters are going to get paid. And then after that, then you can negotiate sides. Sides can negotiate how much money a fighter's making based on how popular they are. It doesn't stop because they have a collective bargaining agreement in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes getting paid a crap ton of money because they have a collective bargaining agreement in a union. Same thing shouldn't happen in UFC or WWE.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, the union is the answer to those contracts being better, right? Because if the union says, okay, every single contract, everyone makes at least $50,000 per fight, and if UFC doesn't agree to that, nobody fights for the UFC, and the UFC makes zero money, realistically, right? So, and ESPN and Disney are like, what the fuck is going on? So, yeah, I do think unions would be good. But as far as the Jon Jones and Ngannou fight, I still hope it happens. Now, Eric, I want to toss this to you again. is there? Because I was thinking about this too. I was thinking about every single angle this possible next Francis fight, and he said he wants to fight twice. He wants to fight Jon Jones and Derek Lewis. I don't think he gave an actual, whether he wants to fight one first or the other. Francis is a fighting champion. Is there something to, because of the lack of star power in the heavyweight division, that maybe the Jon Jones fight waits a little bit and we see Francis defended against a Derek Lewis first to see if he really is truly a legitimate champion? Because if Ngannou gets knocked out by Derek Lewis, the heavyweight division, no disrespect to Derek Lewis, becomes kind of a joke of essentially guys just knocking each other out and there's no actual skill. And I think Jon Jones essentially beats everybody at that point. But so what are your thoughts? Do you think there's any version where a Jon Jones fight next actually helps the situation?
The only thing I can see, and I also just came across Derek Lewis, he said that he'll do it for $8 million. Shit.
Oh, he jokes around. He's not getting $8 million.
I don't know if he's
Derek
joking.
Lewis is not getting $8 million.
Yeah, so I don't see him getting $8 million. But they're like, it's just Derek Lewis just being funny again.
So let me explain to RKJ why he said this. So Derek Lewis is the guy to say his balls were hot, everything. He's a real jokester guy. Derek Lewis. So Jon Jones tweeted, I got offered, or I offered myself, I want more than the 8 to 10 million some guys have made. So then Derek Lewis said, I'll fight for 8. it is perfect comedy, bro. It's perfect.
I love Derek Lewis.
And Jon Jones probably still got pissed because he's kind of a pussy.
Really quickly, I wouldn't pay Derek Lewis $8 million just because he hasn't figured out a way to control his balls. I wouldn't pay it. Like, there's hydrocortisone cream, there's CBD powder, there's a lot of things you could do. The Black Hammer. He needs to figure out that ball situation first before we can pay you $8 million.
Derek Lewis is the type of guy that would listen to our podcast and actually challenge RKJ into a fight. Like, Derek Lewis is the guy that if we went directly to him, he might actually listen. Lewis. I'm going to cut a clip for Derek Lewis and send it to his DMs.
Whatever you want to do, bro. Man can't take care of his balls.
His balls are hot, man. He's going to give you the Black Hammer. So watch out, RKJ, man.
I mean,
Black Hammer on my own, bro.
I mean, the fight between the fight between Francis and Jon Jones, it's going to get situated, but the fight's not going to happen anytime soon. Obviously, from what we heard, was that Jon Jones actually sent his lawyer to, I think, trying to figure out what the situation is with the pay. That's all he can do for right now is see what he can do, what UFC, what their offer could be, and trying to get into negotiations. So he's right now in negotiations. So it's going to take a while for that to happen. But with that being said, I guess Francis is like, okay, I guess if Jon Jones, while he gets that situated, I'm going to spend my time and actually take on some of the guys that are deserving, So maybe Derek Lewis might be, I know he wants another shot at Derek Lewis because that first encounter, it was bad. I mean, we don't want to go back to it. So that's something that Francis would love to go and have, tango again with Derek Lewis. Stipe, I mean, I don't know. It'd be too soon, but if UFC is trying to get Stipe's, star power or sort of kind of listen to Stipe, because Stipe said that he feels underappreciated before he went up against Francis. So he would probably want to prove the UFC wrong and prove Dana wrong and probably do that. But yeah, that's what they're going to do, is that they're going to throw Francis a couple heavyweights at him and until they get the Jon Jones situation settled.
Yeah, I mean, his only losses are to Derek Lewis, and it was to Stipe. He avenged the loss to Stipe, so avenging the loss to Derek Lewis, I could 100% understanding him wanting to get that fight, because Deontay Wilder wanted to avenge a bad win against Luis Ortiz and got the job done with a brutal knockout. So I can see this happening. Obviously, we know what happened with Deontay Wilder after that, so hopefully that same thing doesn't happen to Francis, but nonetheless. So to end the podcast really quickly, we have about 5 minutes left. I wanted to get everybody's thoughts on Nate Diaz and Leon Edwards being announced for UFC 262. Nate Diaz going up to 170 from his normal 155 to fight a killer in Leon Edwards, a guy we all respect, but just has had the most unfortunate luck in the UFC. and it being the first ever 5-round non-title co-main event in UFC history. Everybody's thoughts on this?
I was gonna say, Leon and Bilal Muhammad should run it back. I mean, Bilal got kind of cheated. I feel for him because, like, he's got his eyes poked, and he should have his rematch. But if Diaz wants to step in and give some slaps and then do his thing, I wouldn't be opposed to it, because any match, any fight that Nate Diaz is in, any Diaz brothers actually, Nick or Nate, it's going to be very, very interesting. We've seen it with the Anderson Silva. We've seen it with Masvidal. We've seen it with Conor. We've seen it with many other fighters like Benson Henderson. I mean, it's always interesting.
Yeah, no doubt. Eric, your thoughts on Edwards fighting Diaz?
I'm excited. I love Leon. Hopefully they get the whole eye poke situation settled, because a lot of fighters have been voicing about the eye poke and glove situation. But I'll say this: Edwards better be ready, because Nate Diaz will come at you like a dog. Masvidal said himself, he just comes at you like with that killer mentality, and so you need to put him down. But Nate's like a dog, just a really bad mofo. So yeah, he's gonna have a rough night, and I'm excited for Nate Diaz. He's exciting to watch.
And then, so RKJ, man, your thoughts, again, as a casual fan, Nate Diaz returning against a legitimate welterweight contender, a guy we all actually thought might be the next, champion, the next guy in the welterweight championship match. Diaz coming off a loss to Jorge Masvidal. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
It's going to be a good match, I think. But for me personally, the allure and everything about Nate Diaz for me is vanished. Like, personally, he's starting to get up there. I don't know how old he is. Could somebody verify how old he is?
35, 36.
35 with a lot of fights under his belt.
He's starting to get into that age range for me personally, where I'm starting to look at him. If he loses this fight to Leon Edwards, I'm going to look at him sideways and be like, maybe you should give it up. Maybe you should hang up again, because I mean, he didn't have an impressive fight against Masvidal, and he just seems a little slower in his previous fight. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be in Houston, so there's going to be probably a full crowd there, because considering that's in Texas. So that's going to be a very interesting situation. The crowd dynamic is going to be awesome, and this is a chance for Leon Edwards to get a win over a top star in UFC and to put himself in that big name range for some major fights coming on down the road.
Yeah, well, what's funny enough too is like that this is essentially a number one contenders fight in the welterweight division, as crazy as that sounds. And you also have the potential of, if Masvidal somehow captures the championship at our next pay-per-view and Nate Diaz beats Leon Edwards, who the hell thought that we would have the BMF rematch for the welterweight championship? We actually have it set. Again, RKJ, these storylines are kind of ridiculous going on in the UFC. I'll say this about this fight. RKJ, I kind of agree with you a little bit, although I don't think Nate Diaz is in retirement mode if he loses. I think the only thing that man can do is fight Conor McGregor if he loses this next fight. I think he can fight Conor McGregor either way, but I think essentially as an MMA fighter, as a headline MMA fighter, he can only fight Conor McGregor if he loses this fight, and that would be the only man that really probably would, because McGregor, Nate Diaz thinks he beat McGregor twice, and McGregor doesn't think that way, and McGregor obviously won the second fight. So, interesting stuff. Again, so we're going to have a couple big podcasts coming up for you guys. We have our WrestleMania preview next week, and then the next coming weeks, we are going to be talking about Jake Paul and Ben Askren. What an odd matchup that is. Wow. Coming up in the next couple podcasts. We'll obviously be once again previewing UFC 261. So a lot of good stuff. Watch out for some content on Bellator tomorrow. It's a Friday night card. This podcast is coming out Friday morning early. So we didn't want to, have something on the podcast that was only going to last for 12 hours. So we're going to talk about that in some other way on our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or at least one of them to just give a little promotion there. Once again, thank you to everybody that's been watching our stuff. Again, over 3,000 views on our last video for, I believe, the third or fourth video in a row. So you guys are really hooking it up. We thank you so much. And I'll let RKJ Man take it away to end the podcast.
Amen. Like, comment, and subscribe. But as always, raise a glass in the sky and salute the ring generals.